Thank you so much for attending this month's Lunchbox lectures. This history lecture series takes place on the third Tuesday of every month in the Old Father Auditorium at the Nebraska History Museum here in Lincoln, Nebraska. You can learn more about our museum, our programming, and all of the services provided by the Nebraska State Historical Society online at history.nebraska.gov. If you are not already a member of the Nebraska State Historical Society, I highly encourage you to join. The support of our members makes it possible for us to provide free programming like these Lunchbox lectures to Nebraskans here in Lincoln, but also statewide. A special thanks to the Nebraska State Historical Society Foundation, whose support allows us to record and broadcast these programs across the state and online. We would also like to thank LNKTV, a service of the City of Lincoln, for producing these programs. If you would like to watch previous programs or check out our Nebraska History podcast, you can find us on YouTube at NE Historical. Today, I am thrilled to welcome Thane Baker Nicholson and her father, Thane Baker. Catherine reached out to me a few months ago with this amazing story, and I was very excited to invite her to speak, her and her father to speak here at the museum. As you can tell, I am not an athletic person myself. I have tried to do track and field, and then I quickly got really hurt, and my mom said, please don't do that. So I do not have experience myself, but I really appreciate and admire all of the folks, all of the athletes across Nebraska and the United States who put so much time and effort into training and representing our state and our country. So today I'm really proud to welcome Thane Baker. Nebraska resident Thane Baker, at age 93 and a half, is the oldest living United States Olympic medalist in track and the second oldest male track medalist in the world. Very impressive. He was a walk-on to the Kansas State track team and earned a silver medal in the men's 200 meters in Helsinki, Finland in the 1952 Olympics, wearing borrowed socks and shoes, which I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about. 4 years later, he won a gold medal in the 4x100 meter relay, which set a world record, a silver medal in the 100 meters, and a bronze medal in the 200 meters at the 1956 Melbourne, Australia Olympics. And while he hasn't lived in Nebraska his entire life, he is a Nebraskan now, and we like to celebrate everyone who lives in our state and their amazing accomplishments. Speaking of amazing accomplishments, Thane's daughter, Thane Baker Nicholson, is currently pursuing her PhD in Olympic history from the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, which is also a huge accomplishment. She also has earned a law degree at the University of Texas School of Law and her Bachelor's of Arts degree from Rice University, where she was also a collegiate national champion in the 800-meter run, so runs in the family a little bit. Thank you for laughing at my pun. Nicholson also wrote a book about her father's experience in the 1952 Olympics called Running in Borrowed Shoes, Thane Baker and the 1952 Summer Olympics. This book is for sale, so they will be selling it and signing autographs at the end of this presentation at the table in the back. So I highly encourage you to check out the book and stop by and chat with Thane and Catherine. Please join me in welcoming Catherine and Thane to give their presentation.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you so much for coming. Being a history major, I've learned a lot about our country, and so I just want to start by acknowledging the Native American people who lived here first and who still live here. And I want to thank Samantha particularly because she's been my contact back and forth, and the Nebraska Historical Society for letting me come here today and share my father's amazing story. So we'll start off with the title, Running in Borrowed Shoes. The shoes on the left are the shoes he borrowed. There's a later picture where you'll get to see the back of the shoes. That's exciting too. And this is a picture an artist made of my father. And then that's a picture on the right of my dad running at Kansas State. And you'll notice the track is not like it is today. The tracks were called Red Dog or ground brick dust, rocks. Dad used to wear, depending on the track, as long as the half-inch spike. So Dad was born at home in 1931 in Elkhart, Kansas. On the left, you see his parents, Susie and Walt. On the right is the home where he was born. The doctor said that he was there at the birth, but I don't think he made it in time. So if you're wondering where Elkhart is, it's right in the corner of Kansas, about a half mile from Oklahoma and about 8 miles from Colorado. It was right in the heart of the Dust Bowl. So my dad knew hard times. These are pictures that were taken when my dad was 5 years old. So you see the dust storm rolling in, and by the time the dust storm fully comes in, it's completely dark. People died of dust pneumonia. They would inhale the dust, and when they would cough it up, it would be black. Dad had to sit in the basement with his mother and his sister, and that he would wear a mask that she had dipped in fresh egg white, and that's where he would stay until the storm was over. So here we have my dad when he was about 7 years old. And this is the beginning of his Olympic journey, because when he was 7 years old, he saw an Olympic athlete, and he said, "Oh, wow, I want to be an Olympian." So the man he saw was Glenn Cunningham. Glenn Cunningham ran in the 1932 Olympics, and he was fourth place in the 1500. He also ran in the Berlin Olympics, where he was second place. So Elkhart, Kansas hosted a Glenn Cunningham Day, and Dad saw Glenn Cunningham run down the street and said, "That's who I want to be." Glenn Cunningham had his own problems. There's a book written about him that he wrote called Never Quit. When he was a young boy, about 7 or 8, he was very badly burned in a fire. His brother died in the fire. Glenn Cunningham did not walk for a year. He finally learned to walk holding onto the tail of a cow. And from there, he became an Olympian. So he was Dad's hero. And his legs, you can't really see it here, but they were badly scarred from the burn. So Dad began working in a garage, a Ford garage, in a car repair shop. Nothing about OSHA back then. In fact, it was a time when they did have child labor laws, but evidently they hadn't reached Elkhart, Kansas. There were men offering to do Dad's work at Dad's wages. So Dad knew he had to work really hard to keep his job. But unfortunately, it was dangerous. And so when he was 14, Dad got a piece of metal under his kneecap. And he had 2 surgeries. They left a 4-inch scar, but they could not get the metal out. The doctor said he had to give up athletics. He could not run in athletics. And Dad was really upset about that. I mean, he had literally been training for years for the Olympics. His mom timed him with the alarm clock that did not have a second hand. And he would run everywhere, and his friends had long jump pits, and they made high jump pits, and they just had a blast, and that was their fun thing because they were following their hero. Well, so go ahead.
You didn't say how much I made it.
Go ahead. How much did you make a day?
35 cents a day.
35 cents a day. So hard work, hard work. So Dad limped through high school, first with crutches and then with a cane. No more sports. But when he was a junior in high school, his knee felt better. He talked the doctor into letting him try. So he did try, and he made it to the state meet his senior year, to the finals, and placed last place in the 100 yards and last place in the 220 yards. So he graduated from Elkhart High School, and then he went on to college at Kansas State. And he read an article in the newspaper saying, "Anyone interested in track, come down and see me." Coach Ward Haylett was the coach at Kansas State. And that building on the right is where they had their meeting. It was called Nichols Gym at the time. Now it's Nichols Hall.
And Ward Haylett said, okay, I'll let you walk on. I think I'll make a quarter-miler out of you. So Dad practiced very hard and continued to run everywhere he went around the college campus. And he listened to his coach. And this is a picture with Dad on the left. The next man is Dick Towers, and then Verl Schweitzer and Coach Ward Haylett. This was early 50s. So when they went to Missouri, Verl Schweitzer might have been the first black man to run on the Missouri track. They had problems finding places to eat where they could eat together. There was a refusal of service, that sort of thing. But they all worked together as a team. Both Verl Schweitzer and Dick Towers ended up in administration at Kansas State, and Verl Schweitzer ended up playing professional football. So Dad started having success. He tied the world record in the 60-yard dash. Now, I'm going to tell you some numbers, and I'm going to do a little explanation. Dad ran 6.1 seconds in the 60. That's really fast. And in fact, on the books, it's faster than Carl Lewis. But the difference was Carl Lewis had automatic timing, which is more accurate, and my father had stopwatch timing, and the reaction time is slower. So reality, probably my dad was not faster than Carl Lewis, but it sounds good. All right, so at the end of my dad's junior year, his coach drove my father and other athletes to compete in the NCAA national championships in California. So imagine 6 men in a car, no air conditioning, Kansas to San Francisco in June. So at the NCAA, surprisingly, Dad qualified for the Olympic trials in both the 100 meters and the 200 meters. He went on to the National Track and Field Championships, where he again qualified, and then went on to the Olympic trials. This was a surprise. His friend Dick Towers also made the Olympic trials. And here's a picture of the Los Angeles Memorial Stadium, taken back in the day. You can look at the outfits, the long skirts the woman's wearing. You can tell it's not a recent picture. So, yes, Dad qualified for the Olympics in the 200 meters. So suddenly he is on the Olympic team. He doesn't have any shoes, except the ones he borrowed from Kansas State. Hey, coach, can I keep the shoes? Sure. So they all flew on this plane, and what's exciting about it is, look at the 3 tails, and had 4 prop engines. It wasn't a jet, but this was one of the first pressurized cabins, and so a lot of the people on that plane had not been on a big plane before in their life, which was fine until the plane caught on fire. And so the pilot said, all right, everybody, I'm going to put it in a dive, get in your seats. So he cut the engines, and the plane went in a dive, and everyone and everything went everywhere. Dad tried to catch the stewardess, now flight attendant, but he couldn't hold on to her, and eventually 4 athletes caught her. She was unfortunately pretty banged up. But then the plane landed, and no one to this day remembers where. One athlete swore they were in New Mexico. My dad thinks it was West Texas. A couple other people think it was Kansas. Wherever it landed, it was some small airfield, maybe a military airfield. And so some people came out, and they looked at it, and they talked about it, and they thought about it, and they said, okay, everybody back on the plane. And there were people saying, I'm not getting back on that plane. I will take a train to New York. I will catch a ride, I don't care what, but I'm not getting back on that plane. But it came down to the coaches said, hey, do you want to be in the Olympics or not? Okay, so they got back on the plane, and they went on to New York. And in New York, Dad and the Olympians got to see a Dodgers game. Jackie Robinson was playing. They went to Princeton to work out. That's the picture that the Olympic Committee took of my father in New York. And they had a ticker tape parade in July now, and it was wonderful. And then they sat in front of City Hall, and they listened to all these speeches, and that was wonderful too. But it's still July, and the Olympic athletes wore wool blazers and wool pants because they were donated by the Wool Growers Association. And so it was rather hot. And then they had lunch at the Waldorf Astoria. So it's time to get on the plane again, to fly to Finland. That's where the arrow is. Everybody's really excited. They're in their uniforms. They're ready to go. They get on the plane, and the pilot says, "Everybody get off. We have engine trouble." So they had to get off for about 3 hours. And because they were supposed to board about 10 at night, we're now, early morning hours, everybody gets back on. And they've really been up all day because they had the parade and everything else going on. And so they get on the plane, and they're on that plane for over 20 hours. They had many stops for gas and an unexpected stop in Shannon, Ireland, because they were afraid they couldn't make London. So when they got off the plane, they were hot, tired. And another thing about it is, Dad said the level of smoke just kept getting lower and lower in the cabin because the coaches, and wait for it, the athletes smoked on the plane. Some, not all, but enough that when you got off the plane, you stunk of cigarette smoke. So if you're wondering where Finland is, it's right where the arrow is, and that's right next to the Soviet Union. Helsinki is down at the bottom, but there's a dotted line near the top. That is the Arctic Circle. This is the furthest north they've ever had the Summer Olympics. So here they are coming off the plane, looking hot and tired, or just tired. Dad said he tried to sleep on the plane. Everyone's trying to sleep. One thing interesting about it is the plane was integrated because coaches had the athletes sit by sport. So the 100-meter runners sat together, the 200-meter runners sat together, 400-meter runners sat together, and that was great. But you get back with some of those big old throwers, it was a little cozy. So for a long, long journey. So here they're going into the airport. This is the Olympic Village. That is the entrance. Dad took that picture. He had a Brownie camera. The entrance was actually made out of wood because wood was their main construction tool. So kit to use, all to use, for to use, swifter, higher, stronger. Today it's swifter, higher, stronger together. Dad took these pictures inside the Olympic Village. On the right, you see the buildings where they lived. On the left, you see the back of the entrance to the village. So here's the track and field team. I think there were about 73 men. By the way, there were 10 women, and that's another story entirely. That's where my PhD work is. They were treated differently. Can you imagine treating men and women differently? All right, so on the left, you see my dad. A representative of Coca-Cola asked him to pose for that picture. Dad didn't realize that until after he saw the picture. In the center, you see the athletes eating in the tent. They had a restaurant tent. They had to serve 5,000 athletes at a meal, and the tent came from Germany. In my mind, I'm wondering if it was an Oktoberfest tent. That's just my mind. On the right are some athletes. Dad took that picture. So I like this picture. It's showing the U.S. Olympic team integrated with one another, eating. Remember, this is 1952. Brown versus Board of Education was 1954, and even that didn't change the world. So this is good, Although I will tell you the dorm rooms themselves were segregated. However, after the Olympics, they had exhibition tours where not only were the rooms not segregated, but the beds weren't segregated. They had to have 2 athletes per bed. The beds were small and narrow double beds, smaller than the U.S. double beds. And some of those guys were really big, but they had to share. And those beds were integrated because nobody cared. They were just tired. So anyway, these are views from my father's room that he took. I want to tell you a little bit about the Olympic Village. The beds were very small. You can see that man, he's kind of hunched over. They're narrow, they're short. The mattresses are made of straw. So if you look on the right, you see a hanger sitting on that bed. The hanger is straight, the mattress is not. The floors were cement, and nobody had hot water in their bathrooms for showers. So all these athletes are going to be taking cold showers. So here's the Olympic venue, the stadium, and the fanning you see is all made out of wood. So the weather was absolutely beautiful leading up until the day of the opening ceremonies when the skies opened up. Dad stood for 2 hours outside in the rain before the Olympic athletes from the United States could come in. You can see the track is getting torn up. They're all marching in. That night, the officials poured kerosene all over the whole track and lit it. They were trying to get the water off the track for competition the next day. I don't think it was very effective, but it did smell like kerosene after that. So Paavo Nurmi lit the Olympic torch. He was a great athlete from Finland in the 20s. So here's Dad. He's running the curve in his first heat. And so what's interesting about this is look at his left leg. That's the leg towards the inside of the track, and his right leg, and look at the difference in the muscle size. Because Dad had that metal under his knee and the 2 invasive surgeries, that left leg never developed as well as the right leg. So here you see again another picture. You know, you can compare the difference in the leg muscles, both in the thighs and even in the calves. But he didn't let that really slow him down. So here are the borrowed shoes. They had a big metal plate in them. They were very heavy. They certainly didn't have support like we would understand support. And on the right, you see that the one shoe has a hole in it, and the other is pulling out on the side with the stitches. Now, we don't know really when that happened because Dad kept wearing these shoes after the Olympics. It could have happened after the Olympics, but it makes a good story. These are the borrowed shoes. Okay, here's Dad. He's won his first heat easily. The guy behind him is from the Soviet Union. He won a second heat. His third heat, he was second. It was a close race, but it didn't matter. All he had to do was qualify for the finals, which he did. And so coming in on the finals, Dad placed in second place. First place is Andy Stanfield from New Jersey. Third place is right next to Dad. He's Jim Gathers. He was Air Force, and I know he went to Tillotson College in Austin, Texas. I don't know much more about him. So, and Andy Stanfield went to Seton Hall. So here's Dad just minutes after he got his silver medal. Up close, you can see a little bit of sweat on his brow. So I love this picture because here are the finalists in the 200 meters. America placed first, second, and third. But what's really special about the picture is how 5 of the athletes have their arms around each other. I just love that picture, you know, just showing the camaraderie. So here we have, again, my dad on the left, Andy Stanfield in the middle, and Jim Gathers on the right. They gave the athletes flowers and a little box with their medal in it. So no ribbons. And again, here's a copy of the medal, or a picture of the medal and the box. So surprise, surprise, when Dad got home, his dad gave him a car. Now, his dad knew that he'd really been working hard, saving his money because he wanted to buy a car, but he really was spending his summer traveling and competing, so he wasn't saving his money. He did get $2 a day while he was in the Olympic Village, but once they went on exhibition tours, there was no money. They were all very poor, but they'd eat really well because instead of getting the awards at the meet, they would have a dinner afterwards, and then everyone would get their awards there, so fancy dinners. So Dad found this car out in a hedgerow, not this particular car, but that particular model. And his dad took it to the car repair shop and worked on it every night after work until he got it running very smoothly. So here's Dad, and they had a Thane Baker Day, just like they had a Glenn Cunningham Day back in the day. And Glenn Cunningham came. He was there. And so Dad is speaking, and that's his mom and dad. And I look at them, and I just think they're just a second away from crying. I think they're pretty proud. So Dad was kind of a shy guy. He still is kind of humble. And all of a sudden, he's back on campus, and he is the big man on campus. At homecoming, they gave him a suitcase and a certificate. The women on campus elected him favorite man on campus. So that was kind of a surprise. And he's met my mom, Sally Doyle. And so they started dating. This is a Sugar Bowl meet. So nowadays we have Sugar Bowl football games. But back in the day, they also had Sugar Bowl track meets right around New Year's Day. So Dad is finishing first in the 100. Interesting, everyone you see there will be white. because Black athletes could not compete south of the Mason-Dixon line at that time on the same track with white athletes. So many of the big meets that were in the South, there'd only be white people there. Okay, so the AAU selected Dad for the all-collegiate team in the 220-yard dash. That spring, in the Big 7 meet, which has evolved into the Big 12, Dad won the 100 and the 220, and he also set a conference record in the 440-yard dash, and he won the mile relay. So we're now getting to why Lincoln, Nebraska matters in this little presentation, because the NCAA National Championship in 1953 was in Lincoln, Nebraska at the University of Nebraska. So Dad was first in the 220 and second in the 100. So. Well, he set the conference record, but then that was only in the prelims, and he didn't actually compete in the finals in the 440 in the conference because he was saving himself for his other races. Dad had the fastest time in the country in the 100, 220, and 440, according to the newspapers. And there was a little shenanigans in Lincoln, I'm just saying. The coaches got together and they wanted to make sure that Dad could only compete in 2 out of those 3 events because they didn't want the points taken away from their team. So that's the way it works. So that summer, I apologize. It was actually the summer of 53. I wrote 54. Oops. He competed internationally again, and the prizes were teapots and candlesticks and donations from the various businessmen. Dad went into the Air Force. He had been ROTC, and at F.E. Warren Air Force Base, where he was in training, some of his buddies beat him. He could not catch a rabbit. And he said, yes, I can. And he did. So the secret was Dad said, okay, there's a building over there. You guys stand over there. Don't let the rabbit go under the building. And Dad just said, all you have to do is just run him down. And then the rabbit just flopped on the ground, and Dad pushed some grass over the top of him and said, okay, I got him, and let him go. He said, if it had been a jackrabbit, I wouldn't have had a chance. But a rabbit, yeah, no problem. Cottontail. Whoops, that was me. Hold on. Okay. So Thane and Sally got married. They had 66 years of beautiful marriage. They lived in the Air Force in Germany. And Dad did compete a little bit while he was over there, and they traveled together. They were having a good time. But Dad wasn't in the best shape. However, he got a letter from a Major Johnson in Washington saying, hey, how would you like to come back to the Air Force, come back to the United States and train for the 1956 Olympics as a member of the Air Force? And so my dad went to talk to my mom because they'd had plans. They were going to go to they were going to go to Spain, they were going to travel, they were going to do all these things, but instead, did they want to go back? So Dad had another shot at the Olympics, and Mom agreed. I'm going to let anyone that wants to ask my dad the question of how that all worked out, and with his current command that he had to leave to go train for the Olympics, I'll let you ask that question. So he did come back to Lockburn Air Force Base, and he trained at Ohio State. Mom went back to Kansas State and finished her last semester of college. So she had married and was a semester short of graduation. So Dad was doing really well. He broke a world record in the 330 yards at the Ohio State relays. The man in second, he's kind of right by those hurdles, was Glenn Davis. And Glenn Davis was someone who was maybe not training as hard as he should have been, and maybe had a really good opinion of himself. But when Dad beat him this time, Glenn Davis decided he better get busy and start training. It worked out because Glenn Davis won a gold medal in Melbourne in the 400-meter hurdles. So it all worked out. So Dad trained really hard, and he tied the world record in the 200 meters, which at that time was 20.6. I don't know if this picture was the tie of the world record, but I just know this was a picture he was running at the time. Dad really battled a lot of injuries that year, and so it was interfering with his training. So that was really a problem. And then he went to the all Air Force track meet where he maybe could have qualified for the Olympics, but he hurt himself and did not qualify for the Olympics. So now he had one more chance to qualify for the trials, and that was the national championship. And he did qualify in both the 100 and the 200. So at the Olympic stadium, he qualified in Los Angeles. He qualified the 100 meter and the 200 meter. When he qualified for the 100 meter, he cried. He had not expected to make it in the 100, and he was really sad, happy, sad, just emotional. Let's call it emotional. And he went over to the side where my mom was and where her father was, and someone started heckling my dad from the stands because my dad was crying. And his father-in-law, my grandfather, was the only NCAA wrestling champion that Kansas State ever had. All 5'8" banty rooster of him, and he said, "You want to come down here and talk to me about that?" And that was the end of that problem. So the Olympians had a lot of fun. They went to Hollywood. There's Kirk Douglas and Susan Hayward. They're filming a top secret affair. So right next to Dad is Andy Stanfield, the person who beat him in the 200 and 52. And so here you're seeing members of the 4x400 meter relay team: Lamont King, my dad, Bobby Morrow, and Ira Murchison. So this is just a practice meet about November 1st in 1956. And you're like, why would you have a practice meet for the Summer Olympics in November of 56? Well, because it's in Melbourne, Australia. That's why. So the Olympics were in November and December. So they were going to fly over, but they were short a few planes. So the Air Force said, hey, we'll loan you a couple planes to get the Olympic team over. They spent some time in Hawaii. Dad said the way this picture was taken is they had all the Olympians lined up. Everybody just got up there, stood there, had their picture taken, moved on, next athlete. So there you go. So this is a picture of my mom. She was on a private tour. Actually, it was a track and field news tour. Ever since 1952, at least, they have had tours to go to track events. So Mom was on that tour, and she stayed in a private home. So here's Melbourne, Australia. You can see it's on the southern part of Australia. So November 22nd to December 8th. So there were many track and field Olympians who also served in the military. Dad was in the Air Force. He was the senior Air Force officer among the Olympians, so he was their point of contact. He said nobody ever had any problems. So I love this picture. Dad is handing off the baton to Bobby Morrow. So the way the 4x4, and Dad's going to correct me if I'm wrong, it was Ira Murchison first leg, Lamont King second leg, Dad was third leg, and Bobby Morrow was fourth leg. So, is that right? Right, that's just a practice. So in Australia, not only had been fighting injuries and not really in the best shape that he wanted to be because of injuries, he stepped off a curb in Australia and sprained his ankle. So he was having some trouble, but he still managed to get a silver medal in the 100 meters. And so that's Bobby Morrow first, Dad is second, and Hector Hogan of Australia is third. Funny story, the newspaper in Australia said, well, actually, Hector Hogan's center of mass was ahead of Thane Baker, so Baker should give his medal to Hector Hogan. But in track, it matters where is your torso. The torso is the defining line of who is the winner. It's not your head, it's not your hands, it's your torso. Dad's torso was first. Or second, actually. All right. So he got his bronze medal in the 200 meters. Yeah, Dad said the difference too was he was trained in running indoor, and in indoor running, you always have to lean at the tape. And Hector Hogan had been always the winner, and he wasn't used to that lean, so he just threw his shoulders back. So here we see Dad, Bobby Morrow, and Andy Stanfield. Dad had beaten Andy Stanfield in every time they raced that year until the Olympics, but that's okay. So here we have, this picture came out of a newspaper wire. This is Dad handing off the relay baton to Bobby Morrow. And I asked Dad what he said, and it's like, go, go, go. So Dad was in the 52 and the 56 Olympics. As my husband says, he entered 4 Olympic events and he got 4 medals. So, but he stopped running. He had a wife, he had a daughter, he had a son, he had work. He worked for Mobil Oil for 39 years. He was a colonel in the Air Force Reserves. But when he turned 40, he started running again and began setting world records again as a masters runner. He also spent 55 years starting track meets. So he was paying it forward. And actually, he's disagreeing with me, but his 56th year was this spring when he started a meet in Kansas State. So thank you for learning about my father. I have a book in the back, Running in Borrowed Shoes, if you're interested. Kansas State loaned the shoes to my father, and the medal is still in his knee and shows up on x-rays. So now we have a video.
I was in elementary school. PE teacher starts talking about this guy he went to the Olympics back in the day, and he was one of our fathers. And he looks at me and asks, what's it like? And I was like, well, what are you talking about? My dad's extremely humble. So I didn't know anything about the Olympics. I didn't know he was in the Olympics.
My dad has 4 Olympic medals. He entered 4 Olympic events and he got 4 medals.
Well, my name is Thane Baker. I'm from Elkhart, Kansas, small town in southwestern Kansas. Grew up there, lived the whole life there until I went to Kansas State University, which was the best thing that happened in my life going there.
My dad talks about when he got to Kansas State, he didn't know anything. He really didn't. He grew up in a little tiny town.
When I was about 7 or 8 years old, Glenn Cunningham from my hometown ran in the 1936 Olympics, and he came back to Elkhart and had a Glenn Cunningham Day, and he ran down Main Street in his Olympic uniform, and I was standing there watching him, and that's the finest thing I ever saw. So I turned around to my father and said, I want to run the Olympics someday. And so all through school growing up, I ran everywhere I went.
And then when he was 14, there was a work accident.
I was working in a garage and I got a piece of steel in my knee. And 2 operations later, the doctor said, we can't get the steel out.
So they told him he had to give up athletics. He couldn't participate in any sports.
Yeah, I know the doctor sat there on the bed next to me and said, give up athletics. My mother had tears rolling down her cheeks over there because she knew my dream was to run. And of course, I told my mother, that's going to be the end of my dream. It's hard to put into words. When you're young, you have a dream and you want to do it. Well, try. Don't just sit back and say, well, I can't do that. I'm going to try. And I tried, and it worked. And so the good Lord was looking after me.
2 years later, after limping through high school, he got permission to go out for athletics again.
Well, he was a guy who didn't necessarily have an enormous amount of success at the high school level.
And in the 100, I got last place, and in the 220, I got last place. I went to Kansas State, and the coach put an article in the Kansas State Collegian one day. If anybody would like to try out for the track team, show up at Nicholson Gym at 7 o'clock, and we'll talk about it.
And Coach said, sure, come on, give it a try, and he just blossomed.
He got faster and faster.
It is amazing that he was able to do what he was able to do as a walk-on.
We ran in the NCAA and AU meet.
And there my dad qualified for the Olympic trials. Then when he went to the Olympic trials, he qualified for the Olympic team in the men's 200 meters and took off.
The 1952 Olympic Games are on.
First American sweep is in the 200-meter dash, oldest race in Olympic history.
Let's look at the dirt kicking up behind the runners. See the dirt kicking up behind us.
You're in the outside lane, see on the left?
Jersey City, who forges ahead to break the tape in 20 and 7/10 seconds, equaling the Olympic record set by Jesse Owens in 1936.
And everybody hugs,
Baker of Elkhart,
hugs,
Kansas,
and then,
with the bronze medal for
look,
third.
Dad, you go off and do a little
Air
dance.
Force sprinter, Jimmy Gathers of Brooklyn and Sampson Air Force Base.
How do you do that?
The 200-meter was the only event.
He won a silver medal in the men's 200 meters, wearing borrowed socks and borrowed shoes.
You have a dream. Pursue the dream, and you could be surprised what it will lead to. It will lead to so many things in your life. Additional things from the things that related to your dream. Even if you don't maybe quite as successful in your dream as you wanted to be, there'll be so many things you will learn from your dedication to trying to do better. Pick a goal in life, music, whatever it might be, and excel. Try to do the best that you can, and you will do better than you think you can. And the good Lord will help you along the way.
He and my mom got married, and then my dad went to Germany. My mom soon followed. And there he is working in Germany as an officer, and he gets a letter from Washington, D.C. Hey, would you like to come back to the United States and train for the 1956 Olympic team as a member of the Air Force? He got a gold medal in the 4x100 meters. They set a world record. He got a silver medal in the 100 meters and then a bronze medal in the 200 meters.
The thing that really has always impressed me about Thane was, one, he was very humble. He was someone with his resume to just be as normal as he is pretty remarkable in this day and age.
What my dad did not know was that Kansas State University cast a bronze bust of him when he was a runner at Kansas State.
A lot of people that have accomplished what he's accomplished athletically, think they're owed something. He's always looked at it like he owes the university something. It's very meaningful for me to honor him in that way because I just think he's one of the truly special K-Staters.
My dad was really, really surprised. It was beautiful. This bust is going to go in the new indoor track facility for the Kansas State athletes.
Sometimes you need to sit down and think about what Christ has done for us and what he's given us. We just don't take the opportunity enough time to thank him. I have in my pocket a marble. In 1958, a man named I.F. Calley, we called him If Calley, he passed around a bag of marbles and said, everybody take a marble. He says, carry that marble with you. If somebody has rubbed you the wrong way or something, take that marble out and think about the good things about that person. Think about the good things in life that you have the opportunity to take advantage of, and think about it and hold that marble. I still got the marble. Because there's good in everybody, there's good in everything. And if it takes a marble to remind you of it, get a marble. Hey, get a marble. There's so much beauty in this life. Take advantage of it and thank the good Lord for what he's given us.
They can look at a guy like Thane Baker and say, now here's somebody that I could admire. I've always been proud to know him.
He's really one of those people that inspires you to be better than you are.
My life has been so fantastic. I never thought I would near have the opportunity to give back to other situations in my life. I've tried to pay back to my children, and I think that they have more than rewarded me with their lives, in ways they've given back.
I actually went to a writing conference where I heard someone say, listen to God's whispers, and that's what you should write about. And so I heard God's whisper saying that I should write my dad's story. And I wrote a book called Running in Borrowed Shoes. I'm really proud of my dad. I am super proud of everything he's accomplished, not just with the Olympics, but with life. He's had a great life. And it's not over yet. He's 92, but he's still traveling and enjoying going and doing.
Man, I gotta tell you, there's sometimes I don't know how I don't deserve this. Growing up, you didn't understand what you had. He's absolutely special. Probably the best I know. I know the best I know.
When you walk into the Olympic Stadium for the first time, you're numb. I mean, you're trying to take in everything, but you're there for a purpose, but you're almost numb. Is this really happening? Can this be what I wanted my whole life? Okay, now what am I going to do with it? What am I going to do with my opportunity? When you walk into the stadium, where you walk into the auditorium, to walk into whatever you do, when you walk in there, That is an opportunity to take advantage of what you have learned in your life. There are opportunities out there. Look for them, find them, and try to achieve them. And when you're lucky enough to make the Olympic team and put on your spikes and run in the Olympics, do the best you can.
Thank you so much, Catherine and Thane, for sharing that amazing story of perseverance and following your dream. We do have a few moments for questions, so if you have questions for either of them, just raise your hand and we'll make sure you have the microphone so everyone can hear your question.
I am curious about your moment in the Air Force when you got the letter from Washington, D.C. to come back and join the Olympics team. I'm part of the United States Air Force, and first of all, thanks for your service to the country. Well, sir. So what happened with your commander at that moment? I suspect, it sounds like there was a moment.
Okay. I got the letter on 3-ring notebook paper from a Major Johnson in Washington, and he said, your name has come to my attention of being in the Air Force, and you had some success in 52. Would you like to come back and try for the 56 team while you're in the Air Force? And I wrote back the same way on 3-ring notebook paper, longhand. Yes, Major Johnson, I would like to, but I got some problems. First of all, I'm due to be discharged June the 15th, and the Olympic trials aren't until June the 28th and 29th, so I'll be out of the Air Force when the Olympic trials come along. So I would need an extension until July 1st or July 15th so that I could be in the Air Force if I made the Olympic team. And then I got another problem. If I made the Olympic team, the Olympics are in November and December, and so I'd need a 6-month extension till December 31st so I could run in the Olympics. And I got a third problem. I'm signed for a lot of equipment over here in Germany, and you said go back TDY, temporary duty, which meant I had to come back to my same assignment. I'd have to get a permanent transfer to the United States so I could stay there and train there and not have to come back to Germany and see if my property I was all signed for was still there. So in about 2 weeks, here came a letter down through channels to my commanding officer that says, change Baker's release date from June 15th till July the 15th. And at his request, change his release date till December 31st and transfer him to Lockburn Air Force Base, Columbus, Ohio. So he read that, he called me up to his office and threw that, what do you know about this? I said, well, sir, I got a letter, and I replied back to Washington and told them of my situation. You mean you went back to Washington, D.C. without going through me? He wasn't very happy about that. Anyway, he said, well, you're not going to take it, are you? I said, sir, I must take advantage of that opportunity. I'm sorry, but I'd like to take advantage of that opportunity. All right, then get the heck out of here. And so I was back in the States by February, and as Catherine mentioned, since I wasn't in real good shape, I pushed too hard early, and so I had a little muscle trouble in March and April. But by the time the all Air Force meet and the all service meet came around, well, doing pretty good until the all service meet. Then I pulled another muscle. So I had 1 week to qualify for the Olympic trials, and that was in the National AAU, which anybody could. Anyway, I ran there, and it was one of those days when that track was fantastic, and I tied the world record that day, and which means I made the Olympic trials. So because of the letter from Major Johnson, I got to go to the Olympics another day. Any other questions?
There's one back here.
Thank you very much for this. Great story. One question I had, did you immediately decide to quit after Melbourne, or was there anything in your mind thinking, I can do this one more time maybe, or was that it?
I didn't have the slightest idea that I would ever have the opportunity to try the 56 Olympic. I was married, had a job with Mobil Oil and working, and so that letter to get a chance to try again just came out of the blue. And so being a person that wanted to see what I could do again, I just had to take advantage of that opportunity. Yeah. No, because there again, I didn't have the opportunity. I was working, so to come back again, I just didn't think that any opportunity. I was in Hobbs, New Mexico, and there wasn't any opportunity for any warm-up meets or anything like that, except for they come to the AAU meets. So, yes, I would like to have tried at age 28 again, because other athletes at age 28, Stanfield, they were there, they were again. Bobby Morrow tried for it again, but he didn't make it 60. Catherine, you have an idea? In 1956, coming back from the stadium to go to the Olympic Village, we were in buses, and behind me in the bus, there was a German and a Russian sitting next to him. And the German gentleman spoke English and Russian, so he tapped me on the shoulder and says, this guy would like to ask you a question. And I said, sure. So through the interpreter, the question was, why are you going to take your shoes off and quit here? You're going to continue to run, and why are you, or you know, what's your future for the next Olympics? Anyway, I said, well, I don't have an opportunity to come back again, so this is my last race. I'm giving up. I take my shoes off, and this will be the end of it. Anyway, I asked the question back to the Russian. I said, well, are you going to continue? You're older than I am. You're going to try to continue to run for the next Olympics? He said, yes, because as long as I can train and be the best, they had 6 different training camps in Russia at that time, and the 6 best athletes in each event could live in a training camp. And he said, as long as I can be the best in my area and live in the training camp, I can eat meat. And when I cannot stay in that Olympic training camp, I'll have to eat potatoes. Go home and eat potatoes. That was his comment. I took my son to the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles, and I was supposed to go to the 56 Olympics through a sponsor. I'm beg your pardon, 96 Olympics, and the sponsor that were going to bring us all the gold medalists back to the Olympics in Atlanta. But 2 weeks before the Olympics, the deal which was made fell through, so we had no transportation, no nothing. It fell through because it was a commercial situation between the Olympic team and that particular company that fell through, and so no deal. I have to tell a story about the alarm clock situation. My father worked a mechanic in the garage, and every noon hour he would pull the whistle chain, and the whistle on top of the garage would blow. It was a steam whistle from a steam engine, railroad steam engine, and so you could hear that whistle all over town. And at noon hour he always pulled the chain, blew the whistle. Well, at noon hour I would stand on the edge of the school ground, and when the whistle went off, I would run for home. My mother would be standing on the front porch with her alarm clock in her hand, and when she heard the horn, she would look at the clock. And when I got into the yard, and she would say, maybe it's a little bit better than last time, 6.5 minutes about, or something. It was 7 blocks. But anyway, that was my training run every day coming home for lunch. In my life, there's been a lot of interesting things. You mentioned the fact that we were stationed in Germany, and Sally and I planned to go to Italy and Spain. We had all this planned, all this leave saved up. And then when I got a chance to go back to the Olympics in '56, go back and train, I said, Sally, if you let me take this opportunity, I'll take you to Australia. So that was my motivation, one of my motivations. Back to Sally. She said I met a lady at Kansas State, which I did. I was in an English lit class, and that was kind of a live wire class. And Dr. Combs, the professor, said, hey, this is such a great class. We need to have a picnic as a class. And about that time, the class, I'll appoint some committees next time for getting our picnic planned. So I went up to him, Dr. Combs, would you please appoint Sally Doyle and myself on the same committee? I'd like to get to know her. So the next class, he says, Sally Doyle, you and Baker, you're on the committee to go find a location for our picnic. So that's how I met Sally. You have to plan things out. I'm going to tell you one other story, if I may, if I have the time. I was at Kansas State, a business major, and recruiters came to the campus all the time to interview seniors for their company. And the recruiters would always come to the campus for the engineers. Kansas State, a great engineering school. And you signed up in the engineering building sign up for a 30-minute interview. And during at that time, you would go in and talk to the recruiter and talk to him about how you would be a candidate for his company. So I waited till 4 o'clock Friday afternoon, the last minute anybody could sign up, and I signed up. And so when it came my turn on Friday afternoon for my interview, I would go in there and say, sir, I am not an engineer, but I'm a business major. But here is my resume, and I'd like to tell you why I think I would be a good fit for your company. I did that 6 times, and I got 5 offers. So you have to take advantage, make your own opportunities sometimes. Put your best foot forward, and what have you got to lose? I've been lucky enough to have opportunity to be on so many committees through my life in the church and the YMCA, and it goes on with the committees. So I try to give back where I can. Any other questions? Catherine, do you have a question? Catherine started working on this book about 5 years ago, and for about 3 years she worked on the book, and the last 2 years has been, we went to a publishing company. We went to several publishing companies, and she gave them a draft of the book, and they said, well, that's not the type of book that we normally publish. So we went to TCU Press, and they said, this is just exactly what we're looking for, a situation where an individual, through dedication, is able to be successful, etc. So they said, we will print the book. It took 2 more years for our whole thing to get out. It was supposed to come out just before this last Olympics, but didn't get out until just as the Olympics were over. But one of the greatest joys in my life was working with Catherine on this book. She is a great researcher, and now she's working on the other book for the 56 Olympics. And she spent 1 week in Switzerland, in Lausanne, at the World Olympic headquarters. And then she spent a month at Colorado Springs at the U.S. Olympic headquarters doing research in their archives for the next book. And so, needless to say, I hope it'll be as much fun working on this next one as it's been on the last one. She's a lawyer, and now she's working on her PhD at age 66. I almost gave you 10 years. But needless to say, she is so dedicated, a real hard worker, as you can imagine. Thank you for the opportunity to come here and tell our story. If you take anything home with you, I hope that you say to somebody that give it the best you can. Give it the best you can. There's so many beautiful things in this world. You just got to take advantage of them and be a part of them and give back. And you got to do your best. Do your best. Sometimes when you get through, what you say is, now how could I have done that better? And so you got to keep trying, and I'll keep trying. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.